Have you ever been judged solely on how you look? Imagine sitting in a seat you paid for, only to be humiliated in front of hundreds of people because someone decided you didn't belong. On Flight 802 to London, a senior flight attendant made the biggest mistake of her career. She targeted a quiet 19-year-old girl, accused her of fraud, and even called the police to drag her off the plane. She thought she had all the power. She thought she had won. But she had no idea who was walking down that jet bridge. When the girl's father stepped onto the plane, the silence was deafening, and the instant karma that followed. It wasn't just satisfying, it was legendary. You don't want to miss a second of this. The air inside the cabin of Royal Atlantic Flight 802 smelled of sterilized lemon and expensive leather. It was the scent of exclusivity. While the economy passengers were still wrestling their carry-ons into the overhead bins at the back of the Boeing 777, the first-class cabin was a sanctuary of hushed tones and clinking crystal. Beatrice Geller, the purser for this transatlantic voyage, adjusted the silk scarf around her neck. She caught her reflection in the galley mirror. Not a hair out of place. Beatrice had been flying for 25 years. She knew the rules, she knew the regulars, and most importantly, she knew the types. She prided herself on keeping her cabin pristine, a kingdom where she was the undisputed queen. She scanned the manifest on her tablet, her lips pressed into a thin, crimson line. It had been a terrible morning. Her divorce lawyer had called her at 5 a.m. with bad news about her alimony settlements, and the traffic to JFK had been a nightmare. Her patience was already fraying at the edges, like an old hem. "Champagne, Mr. Henderson?" she cooed, her voice transforming instantly into a mask of professional warmth as she addressed a silver-haired man in 2B. "Please, Bay, you know me." The businessman smiled, accepting the flute. Beatrice beamed, but her smile faltered as she turned toward the front of the cabin. Her eyes landed on seat 1A. It was the most coveted spot on the plane. Maximum privacy, fully reclining suite, the works. Usually it was reserved for diplomats, A-list celebrities, or tech moguls. Today, however, seat 1A was occupied by a girl who looked like she had just rolled out of a dorm room. The passenger was young, black, and dressed in an oversized charcoal grey hoodie that looked 2 sizes too big. She wore distressed denim jeans and a pair of colorful, chunky sneakers that Beatrice immediately categorized as streetwear. A large pair of noise-cancelling headphones engulfed her ears, and she was slumped deep into the leather seat, eyes closed, tapping her fingers on the armrest to a rhythm only she could hear. Beatrice felt a prickle of irritation on the back of her neck. The upgrade lottery, she thought bitterly. System glitches. It happened occasionally. The airline's algorithm would oversell economy and bump someone up. But usually, the lucky winners had the decency to look grateful, or at least dress the part. This girl looked like she had gotten lost on her way to the food court. Beatrice walked over, her heels clicking purposefully on the carpet. She stopped right next to the suite. The girl didn't open her eyes. She didn't acknowledge Beatrice's presence at all. "Excuse me," Beatrice said, her voice sharp. No reaction. The girl's head bobbed slightly to the music. Beatrice's irritation spiked into anger. She reached out and tapped the girl's shoulder, harder than necessary. The girl's eyes snapped open. They were dark, expressive, and currently filled with confusion. She pulled the headphones down around her neck. "I'm sorry? Did I miss the safety briefing?" Her voice was soft, articulate, with no trace of the attitude Beatrice had pre-assigned to her. "May I see your boarding pass, please?" Beatrice asked, extending a manicured hand. She didn't smile. The girl, Chloe, according to the luggage tag on the vintage leather duffel bag at her feet, blinked. I already showed it at the gate, and the flight attendant at the door checked it too. I need to see it again, Beatrice insisted, crossing her arms. We have a discrepancy in the manifest. It was a lie. The manifest clearly said, Chloe Banks, in seat 1A. But Beatrice was convinced there was a mistake, a system error. Or perhaps the girl had swapped seats with someone else while the crew wasn't looking. Chloe sighed, a sound of weary resignation that Beatrice took as guilt. She dug into the pocket of her hoodie and pulled out a crumpled paper pass. Beatrice snatched it. Chloe Banks, JFK to LHR, seat 1A, first class. Beatrice stared at it. It looked legitimate. But looking at Chloe, the hoodie, the sneakers, the way she curled her legs up onto the expensive leather, Beatrice just couldn't reconcile it. It felt wrong. It felt like a violation of the high society aesthetic she worked so hard to maintain. This is a reprint, Beatrice said, narrowing her eyes. Where is your original ticket, or your digital wallet? My phone died, Chloe said calmly. The agent at the desk printed that for me. Which agent? I didn't catch his name. Older gentleman. Glasses. Beatrice scoffed. Very convenient. Look, miss, I don't know how you managed to slip past the gate agents, but this seat costs $12,000. It is not for... She gestured vaguely at Chloe's outfit. Staff travel or economy overflow. Chloe sat up straighter. The fatigue in her eyes was replaced by a steeliness that surprised Beatrice. I didn't slip past anyone. I paid for this ticket. Now, if you're done interrogating me, I'd like a glass of water. Sparkling. No ice. The audacity. Beatrice felt the heat rise in her cheeks. The girl was ordering her around? I'm afraid I can't serve you until we clear this up, Beatrice said, her voice raising just enough to catch the attention of the surrounding passengers. Heads began to turn. Mr. Henderson in 2B lowered his newspaper. A woman in 3A adjusted her glasses to watch. Clear what up? Chloe asked, her voice hardening. I have a ticket. I'm in my seat. What is the problem? The problem, Beatrice hissed, leaning in closer, is that I suspect this boarding pass is fraudulent. We've had issues lately with passengers modifying tickets, and frankly, you don't fit the profile of a first-class passenger. There it was. She had said it. Chloe looked at her for a long moment. The profile? You mean because I'm wearing a hoodie? Or is it something else? Don't play the victim with me, Beatrice snapped, knowing she was treading on dangerous ground, but too angry to stop. She was the purser. She was in charge. I need you to gather your things and follow me to the galley. We need to verify this with the gate agent before we close the doors. No, Chloe said. She put her headphones back on. Beatrice froze. She had never, in 25 years, been blatantly ignored like this. Her authority was being challenged in front of her regulars. If she backed down now, she would look weak. I am giving you a direct order, Beatrice said, her voice shaking with suppressed rage. She reached out and yanked the headphones off Chloe's head. The cabin went silent. The silence that followed Beatrice's action was heavy, thick with tension. Snatching a personal item from a passenger was a massive violation of protocol, and Beatrice knew it the second her fingers touched the plastic. But she was committed now. The adrenaline was pumping, fueled by a bad divorce, a sleepless night, and a deep-seated bias she refused to acknowledge. Chloe slowly stood up. She wasn't tall, perhaps 5'4", but the way she held herself made her seem larger. She looked at the headphones in Beatrice's hand, then up at Beatrice's face. Give those back, Chloe said. Her voice was terrifyingly calm. You will get your property back when you step off this aircraft, Beatrice declared, clutching the headphones like a trophy. She turned to the rest of the cabin, addressing the ogling passengers. Ladies and gentlemen, I apologize for the disturbance. We have a security situation involving a passenger refusing to comply with crew instructions. We will resolve this momentarily. Security situation? Chloe laughed, a dry, humorless sound. I was sitting there listening to Mozart. You're the one who put hands on me. You are disrupting the flight, Beatrice countered, stepping back into the aisle to block Chloe's path, ensuring the girl couldn't just sit back down. I have the authority to remove any passenger who poses a threat to the safety and order of the cabin. I am not a threat. Chloe's voice rose, cracking slightly. She was 19, alone, and clearly starting to feel the weight of the humiliation. I bought this ticket to get to my audition in London. I haven't slept in 24 hours. I just want to sit down. Audition? Beatrice raised a perfectly sculpted eyebrow. Let me guess. A rap video? A gasp rippled through the cabin. That was uncalled for, a voice boomed from row 3. It was a man in a navy suit, looking stern. She showed you her ticket, B. Let the girl sit. Beatrice whipped her head around. Mr. Caldmore, please do not interfere. You don't know the full story. We have protocols for fraud. She's a kid, Mr. Caldmore argued, and you just snatched her property. Give her the headphones. I am doing my job, Beatrice shouted, losing her composure entirely. She turned back to Chloe. Grab your bag, now, or I am calling the police to escort you off. Chloe crossed her arms. Call them. Beatrice blinked. Excuse me? Call them, Chloe repeated. She sat back down, defiantly crossing her legs. Call the police. Call the FBI. Call the Navy SEALs for all I care. I paid £6,000 for a one-way ticket, plus the taxes, on my father's American Express. I have the receipt on my email, which I can't show you because, as I said, my phone is dead. But if you want to delay this whole plane to bring cops on board because you don't like my hoodie, go ahead. See how that works out for your schedule. Beatrice's face turned a shade of puce. She was being baited. This girl was bluffing. She had to be bluffing. No 19-year-old had that kind of money unless they stole it. American Express? Likely a stolen card number. Beatrice marched to the front of the cabin and grabbed the interphone. She punched in the code for the cockpit. Captain, she said, her voice trembling with indignation. We have a problem in first. A passenger is refusing to deplane. Suspected ticket fraud and aggressive behavior. I need you to radio the gate. Get the port authority on board. Immediately. She hung up the phone with a slam and turned back to Chloe with a smug, triumphant smile. They're coming, Beatrice announced. I hope you're happy. Now everyone is going to be late because of you. No, Chloe said, looking out the window at the rainy tarmac. They're going to be late because of you. Beatrice stormed into the galley to wait for the police. Her junior flight attendant, a timid woman named Sarah, was cowering near the coffee maker. B, Sarah whispered. Are you sure? The manifest does say her name, and she has a diamond medallion status code next to it. Glitch, Beatrice snapped, pouring herself a glass of water with shaking hands. It's a glitch, Sarah. I've seen it before. Hackers get into the system, upgrade themselves. And besides, did you see her attitude? She practically assaulted me. I saw you take her headphones, Sarah said gently. She was ignoring safety instructions. Beatrice spun on her. Whose side are you on? I am the purser. When the police get here, you back me up. She was belligerent. She was threatening. Do you understand? Sarah looked down at her shoes. Yes, B. 10 minutes passed. The tension in the cabin was suffocating. Passengers were grumbling, checking their watches. Mr. Henderson was texting furiously. Chloe remained in her seat, staring blankly ahead, though Beatrice could see the girl's hands trembling in her lap. Finally, the heavy thud of the aircraft door reopening echoed through the plane. Beatrice straightened her jacket. This was it. Vindication. Two Port Authority officers squeezed down the narrow aisle, their radios crackling. They looked bored and annoyed to be called out for a removal. "Where's the problem?" the first officer, a burly man with a buzz cut, asked. "Right there." Beatrice pointed a manicured finger at Set 1A. "She refuses to show valid identification. She's in a seat she didn't pay for, and she's been verbally abusive to the crew." The officer sighed and walked over to Chloe. "Miss, you need to grab your bags and come with us." Chloe looked up. Tears were welling in her eyes now, the bravado slipping. "I didn't do anything. I have a ticket." "We can sort that out on the jet bridge," the officer said, reaching for her arm. "Come on, let's not make this harder than it has to be." "Don't touch me." Chloe shrank back into the seat. "Mum, if you resist, we will have to use force," the second officer warned, stepping forward. "Get her off," Beatrice shouted from the galley, feeling a surge of power. "She's delaying the flight." The first officer grabbed Chloe's wrist and pulled her up. Chloe stumbled, her sneaker catching on the carpet. "My bag! My violin!" she cried out, reaching for the overhead bin. "We'll get your bag," the officer said roughly, pulling her toward the door. It was a scene of chaos. A young girl being dragged down the aisle of first class, sobbing, while a smug flight attendant watched with arms crossed. But just as they reached the front galley, the movement on the jet bridge stopped. The officers paused. Someone else was boarding. He didn't look like a passenger. He was wearing a bespoke Italian suit that cost more than Beatrice's car. He carried no luggage, only a grim, terrifying expression. Behind him were two other men. Suits, earpieces, airport security badges. The man stepped onto the plane, filling the doorway. He was tall, with broad shoulders and graying temples. He radiated an aura of absolute command that made the police officers instinctively loosen their grip on Chloe. Beatrice stepped forward, annoyed. "Excuse me, sir. Boarding is closed. We are in the middle of a police removal. You need to step back." The man didn't even look at her. His eyes locked onto Chloe, who was shivering in the grip of the officer. "Daddy?" Chloe whispered, her voice breaking. Beatrice froze. The blood drained from her face so fast it left her dizzy. The man looked at the police officer, holding his daughter's arm. His voice was low, calm, and dangerous as a loaded gun. "Unhead my daughter," he said. "Right. Now." The air in the cabin seemed to drop 20 degrees. The silence that had fallen over the first-class cabin was different now. Before, it was the awkward silence of bystanders watching a public shaming. Now, it was the terrified silence of prey, realizing a predator had entered the room. The man standing in the threshold of the aircraft didn't just look wealthy. He looked like the kind of man who moved skylines. He wore a charcoal three-piece suit that fit his broad frame with architectural precision. His tie was silk, a deep royal blue, and on his lapel sat a small, discreet pin, a golden eagle with spread wings. Beatrice stared at the pin, her breath hitched in her throat, a dry, painful rasps. She knew that pin. Every employee at Royal Atlantic knew that pin. It was the insignia worn only by the board of directors. But he wasn't just a board member. Beatrice's mind raced through the corporate newsletters she usually skimmed and deleted. She flashed back to the mandatory State of the Airline video from 3 months ago. The face was older, sterner in person, but unmistakable. It was Arthur Sterling. Arthur Sterling was the majority shareholder of the Sterling Group, the parent company that had acquired Royal Atlantic 4 years ago. He was the man who signed the paychecks, the man who approved the routes, and the man who, legend had it, had fired a VP of operations on the spot for interrupting him during lunch. And he had just called the girl in the oversized hoodie daughter. The police officer holding Chloe's arm didn't know who Arthur Sterling was, but he knew authority when he saw it. He instinctively loosened his grip, his fingers sliding off Chloe's grey hoodie. "I said." Arthur stepped fully into the galley, his voice rumbling like an approaching thunderstorm. "Unhand her." "Sir," the officer stammered, stepping back but trying to maintain a shred of professional control. "We are responding to a call regarding a disruptive passenger and ticket fraud. This individual, Arthur cut him off, his eyes flashing with a cold, terrifying fire, is Chloe Sterling. And she is sitting in seat 1A because I purchased the seat for her myself." He didn't shout. He didn't need to. The name Sterling hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Beatrice felt her knees turn to water. She grabbed the edge of the galley counter to steady herself. Sterling, Chloe Sterling, the surname on the manifest had been Banks. Why was it Banks? "But," Beatrice whispered, her voice barely audible. "The manifest. It said Banks." Arthur turned his gaze slowly toward Beatrice. It was like being looked at by a wolf. "Banks is her mother's maiden name. She uses it when she travels to avoid exactly this kind of attention, to avoid people treating her differently, though in this case, it seems using an alias didn't protect her from being treated like a criminal." Chloe, finally released from the officer's grip, let out a sob and rushed toward her father. Arthur caught her, wrapping his arms around her small frame, burying his face in her hair. The hard, iron-willed tycoon melted for a split second, whispering words of comfort to his shaking child. "I'm sorry, Daddy," Chloe wept, her face pressed against his expensive suit. "My phone died, and she took my headphones and she wouldn't listen." Arthur stroked her hair, but his eyes remained locked on Beatrice. The tenderness he showed his daughter only made the fury he directed at the crew more terrifying by contrast. "She took your headphones," Arthur repeated, his voice dangerously soft. "She snatched them off my head," Chloe sniffled. "And she said I didn't fit the profile." Arthur gently pulled away from his daughter and looked at the police officers. "Gentlemen, you can stand down. Unless you intend to arrest me for buying my daughter a ticket to her Juilliard final audition." The officers looked at each other, then at Beatrice. The betrayal in their eyes was evident. They had been called in for a security threat, not a domestic dispute with an airline tycoon. "We were told she was belligerent and refusing to show ID," the officer with the buzz cut said, his tone shifting from authoritative to apologetic. "The flight attendant, Miss Geller, stated she was a trespasser." Arthur turned to Beatrice. He took one slow step toward her. Beatrice shrank back, pressing herself against the coffee machine. "Miss Geller," Arthur said, reading her name tag, "you called the police on my 19-year-old daughter. You accused her of fraud. You humiliated her." "Sir, Beatrice's voice was high and thin. She was dressed. She didn't look like what?" Arthur pressed, stepping closer. "Finish that sentence, Miss Geller. I want everyone in this cabin to hear it." "She didn't look like what?" Beatrice opened her mouth, but no words came out. "The truth. She didn't look rich. She didn't look white. She didn't look like she belonged in my world," was stuck in her throat. To say it out loud would be professional suicide, but not saying it was already condemning her. "I was following protocol," Beatrice squeaked, falling back on the only shield she had left. "We have strict rules about verifying." "Protocol?" Arthur scoffed. It was a harsh, ugly sound. "I wrote the protocol, Miss Geller. Page 14, Section 3 of the Royal Atlantic Service Manual. In the event of a manifest discrepancy, the purser is to contact the gate agent for verification via the onboard system. Did you do that? Beatrice swallowed hard. I tried to call the captain. Did you check the gate system? Arthur demanded, his voice rising. No, sir. Did you ask for a secondary form of ID before snatching her personal property? No, sir. So you didn't follow protocol, Arthur concluded, his voice dropping to a lethal whisper. You followed your prejudice. The captain, a man named Miller, who Beatrice had flown with for years, finally emerged from the cockpit. He looked pale. He had clearly checked the VIP list on his own tablet the moment the name Sterling was mentioned over the radio by the gate agent who had frantically called the cockpit moments ago. Mr. Sterling, Captain Miller said, extending a hand that Arthur ignored. Sir, I had no idea you were in the airport. If we had known Ms. Sterling was on board. If you had known, you would have treated her with basic human dignity? Arthur asked, cutting him off. Is that how my airline runs, Captain? Dignity is reserved only for those on the VIP list? No, sir, of course not, Captain Miller stammered. Chloe, Arthur said, turning back to his daughter. Where is your bag? The violin? Chloe wiped her eyes. In the overhead. Row 1. Arthur looked at the police officers. One of you. Get the case. Carefully. It's a 1741 Guarneri del Gesù. It is on loan from the Royal Academy of Music. It is worth $6 million. The cabin gasped collectively. Mr. Henderson, the businessman in 2B, actually dropped his champagne glass. It shattered, the sound echoing like a gunshot. The officer's eyes widened to the size of saucers. He moved toward the overhead bin as if he were handling a live bomb. He gently retrieved the worn, leather-clad case and handed it to Chloe. Is it damaged? Arthur asked Chloe. Chloe popped the latches and checked the instrument. She inspected the neck, the bridge. She let out a long, shaky breath. It looks okay, I think. Arthur nodded. Then he turned back to Beatrice. The look on his face shifted from anger to something far more bureaucratic and terrifying. Captain Miller, Arthur said, without looking away from Beatrice. This flight is grounded. Sir. The captain blinked. We have a full flight. We have a slot. I don't care about the slot, Arthur said calmly. This flight is grounded, because I am declaring this aircraft a crime scene. The declaration hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Crime scene. Beatrice felt the blood drain from her extremities. A crime scene. Sir, that's absurd. I made a mistake. A judgment call. You can't ground a transatlantic flight because of a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Arthur laughed, cold and sharp. You physically assaulted a passenger, my daughter, by forcibly removing property from her person. You filed a false police report claiming she was a security threat. You attempted to have her forcibly removed from a conveyance she paid to be on. That is assault, harassment, and filing a false report. He pulled out his phone. I am calling the airport general manager, and I am calling the head of in-flight services. Nobody is going anywhere until every witness in this cabin gives a statement. Beatrice looked around the cabin, desperate for an ally. Please, she pleaded to the passengers she had been serving moments ago. Mr. Henderson, you saw it. She was being difficult. She wouldn't answer me. Mr. Henderson, who had been staring at the $6 million violin, looked at Beatrice. He picked up his napkin and dabbed a drop of spilled champagne from his trousers. Actually, Bea, he said coolly, I believe she told you she had a ticket. You were the one shouting. Beatrice's heart hammered against her ribs. She spun to the other side of the aisle. Mrs. Gable, you heard her tone." The woman in 3A adjusted her glasses. "I heard you threaten to drag a child off the plane because you didn't like her shoes. It was quite appalling, actually. I've been texting my husband about it." Beatrice felt the walls closing in. The kingdom she had ruled for 25 years, the first-class cabin, had turned against her. "This is ridiculous," Beatrice snapped, her fear turning into defensive aggression. "I am the victim here. I have done this job for 2 decades. I know a fraud when I see one. Who walks into first class wearing a hoodie and ripped jeans?" "People who can afford to wear whatever they want," a voice said from the back of the cabin. It was Mr. Caldmore, the man in the navy suit who had tried to defend Chloe earlier. Mr. Caldmore stood up. "I'm an attorney, Mr. Sterling. Corporate liability. If you need a witness statement regarding Ms. Geller's conduct, I'd be happy to provide one. I recorded the last 5 minutes on my phone." Beatrice froze. Recorded. You can't record on board," Beatrice stammered. "It's against policy." "Actually," Arthur interjected, "it's against policy to record security procedures. It is perfectly legal to record a crew member harassing a passenger. Mr. Caldmore. James Caldmore," the man said, nodding respectfully. "Mr. Caldmore, please email that video to my personal assistant immediately," Arthur said. "Captain Miller, open the door. We are deplaning." "Deplaning?" Beatrice gasped. "All of us?" "No," Arthur said, fixing his cuffs. "Just you, and me, and my daughter, and the police." He turned to the passengers. "Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of Royal Atlantic, I apologize for this disruption. We will be replacing the entire flight crew for this journey to ensure a fresh start. As compensation for the delay, every passenger on this flight will receive a voucher for a future round-trip first-class ticket, anywhere we fly. And for those of you currently in first, your status is upgraded to lifetime platinum as of this moment." A murmur of appreciation, and even a few claps, broke out in the cabin. Arthur had just bought the loyalty of every witness in the room. "However," Arthur continued, his voice hardening as he looked at Beatrice, "Ms. Geller will be accompanying me to the manager's office." "I'm not going anywhere with you," Beatrice said, backing away. "I have a union rep. You can't just fire me." "Oh, I'm not firing you, Beatrice." Arthur smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'm pressing charges." The police officers, who had been standing awkwardly by the cockpit, straightened up. The buzzcut officer looked at Beatrice. "Ma'am, given the statement from Mr. Sterling and the witness accounts, we need to take a statement from you. Off the aircraft." "This is insane," Beatrice shrieked. "I am the purser. I am the authority on this plane." "Not anymore," Arthur said. He gestured to the door. "After you." The walk up the jet bridge was the longest of Beatrice's life. Usually, she walked this path with her head held high, dragging her rollerboard with the swagger of someone who traveled the world for a living. Now, she walked it with 2 police officers behind her and the owner of the airline in front of her. When they reached the gate area, the scene was chaotic. The gate agent, the older gentleman with glasses whom Chloe had mentioned, was typing frantically at his terminal. When he saw Arthur Sterling, he practically vaulted over the counter. "Mr. Sterling, sir, I saw the flag in the system just now. I tried to call the plane." "It's fine, Gary," Arthur said, reading the man's name tag. "Question: did you print a boarding pass for my daughter Chloe about 40 minutes ago?" "Yes, sir," Gary nodded vigorously. "Sweet girl. Her phone died. She was stressed about her audition. I printed it, checked her passport, verified the card used for booking." Everything was perfect. Arthur turned to Beatrice. "You said you suspected fraud. You said she bypassed the gate agent. Did you call Gary?" Beatrice looked at the floor. The terminal carpet was grey and stained with coffee. It was fascinating, suddenly. The line was busy. Liar, Arthur said. You didn't call because you didn't want to be wrong. You wanted to exert power over someone you thought was weak. Arthur turned to the police officers. Officers, I want to file a formal complaint of assault and harassment against Miss Geller. My lawyers will be in touch with the precinct within the hour to provide the video evidence from Mr. Caldmore. Understood, Mr. Sterling, the officer said. He turned to Beatrice. Ma'am, I'm going to need to see your ID. Beatrice's hands shook as she reached for her purse. This couldn't be happening. She was Beatrice Geller. She was the queen of the cabin. Daddy, Chloe said softly, pulling on Arthur's sleeve. She looked exhausted. I'm going to miss the audition. The flight is delayed now. Even if I get back on, I won't make the check-in time at the conservatory. Arthur looked at his watch. Then he looked at the massive glass windows of the terminal, out at the rainy tarmac, where the Boeing 777 sat idle. You won't miss it, Arthur said firmly. He pulled out his phone again and dialed a number. This is Sterling. I need the Gulfstream prepped. Tarmac transfer. JFK to London Luton. Wheels up in 30 minutes. Yes. And call the Royal Academy of Music. Tell the Dean that Arthur Sterling is calling, and I am personally requesting they keep the audition hall open for an extra hour. Tell them I will make a donation to the scholarship fund that will make their heads spin if they agree. He hung up. He looked at Beatrice, who was now weeping silently as the officer wrote down her details. You see, Beatrice, Arthur said, his voice low and final. You judged my daughter by her hoodie. You assumed she had no resources, no connections, no value. You forgot the first rule of service. You never know who you are talking to. He put his arm around Chloe. Come on, sweetie. Let's get you to London. As Arthur and Chloe walked away toward the VIP terminal, leaving Beatrice standing with the police in the middle of the crowded gate area, Beatrice felt the eyes of 100 strangers on her. People were pointing. Some were filming. She had wanted to be the center of attention. She had wanted to prove her authority. She had gotten exactly what she wanted. But the nightmare was only just beginning, because while Arthur Sterling had left the building, the machinery he had set in motion was just starting to grind. And Beatrice was caught right in the gears. Beatrice Geller sat in the living room of her Queen's apartment, the curtains drawn tight against the afternoon sun. It had been 24 hours since she was escorted out of JFK Terminal 4 like a common criminal. She was still wearing her uniform skirt, though she had thrown the blazer onto the floor hours ago. A bottle of Pinot Grigio sat on the coffee table, half empty. She stared at it, her mind racing, trying to construct a narrative where she was the victim. I was stressed, she told herself. The girl looked suspicious. I was protecting the plane. The company will understand. They have to. I gave them 25 euros. She picked up her phone. She had turned it off the moment she left the precinct, terrified of the incoming calls from the crew scheduling department. Now, trembling, she held the power button. The screen illuminated. The device didn't just vibrate. It convulsed. Notifications cascaded down the screen in a blur of banners. Missed calls from her union rep. Missed calls from her ex-husband's lawyer. Missed calls from numbers she didn't recognize. But it was the social media icons that made her stomach drop. She opened the Twitter app. It was trending. Flight to Corin, Nossos, Chloe Sterling. Jos Royal Atlantic racist Beatrice's breath hitched. Her thumb hovered over the top trend. She tapped it. The video, filmed from row 3, was crystal clear. It showed Beatrice's face, contorted in ugly, sneering rage, looming over the small, terrified figure of Chloe Sterling. The audio was crisp. Mr. Caldmore had a high-quality phone. Audition? Let me guess. A rap video? The words echoed in Beatrice's silent living room. Hearing it played back, stripped of the adrenaline and self-righteousness she had felt in the moment, it sounded monstrous. It sounded hateful. Then the camera panned to Arthur Sterling entering the plane. The caption on the video, posted by a user named Odd Justice Watch, read, "Flight attendant bullies 19-year-old girl for not looking rich enough. Turns out the girl is the owner's daughter. Watch the instant regret." 12 million views. 12 million views in one day. Beatrice scrolled down to the comments. It was a digital firing squad. Fly girl. "I've flown with this woman. Beatrice! She was rude to my elderly mother last year because she took too long to drink her tea. Glad she's finally getting exposed." Corporate shark. "Arthur Sterling doesn't play. He grounded the whole flight. That woman is toast." Social justice warrior. "The way she snatched those headphones. That's assault. She needs jail time, not just a firing." Docs master. "Her name is Beatrice Geller. Lives in Queens. Here is her LinkedIn." Beatrice dropped the phone as if it were red hot. They knew her name. They knew where she lived. A pounding on her front door made her scream. She scrambled back into the sofa, clutching a throw pillow like a shield. "Beatrice Geller!" a voice shouted from the hallway. "This is Channel 4 News. We'd like to get your side of the story. Do you hate teenagers, or just minority ones?" "Go away," she screamed, tears streaming down her face. Her phone buzzed again. A text from her ex-husband, Richard. "I just saw the video. The kids are crying. They're being bullied at school because their mum is the airport Karen. Do not come to pick them up this weekend. I'm filing for an emergency custody modification. You are toxic, B." Beatrice sobbed, a guttural sound of despair. She had lost her dignity. She was losing her reputation. And now she was losing her children. But the worst notification was the email that chimed softly amidst the chaos. It was from the Royal Atlantic Human Resources Department. The subject line was stark and terrifyingly simple. Subject: Notice of immediate disciplinary tribunal. Ms. Geller, you are required to appear at the Royal Atlantic Headquarters, Conference Room B, tomorrow at Eudonanu Tashahosa 0 a.m. Your presence is mandatory. Failure to appear will result in immediate termination in absentia. Union representation is permitted, but not guaranteed, to influence the outcome given the severity of the evidence. Beatrice stared at the screen. She poured the rest of the wine into her glass, her hands shaking so badly she spilled half of it on the rug. She had to fight. She had to explain. It was a misunderstanding. It was a glitch. But deep down, as she listened to the reporters shouting questions through her front door, Beatrice knew the truth. There was no glitch. The system was working exactly as it should. It was just finally correcting the error that was her. The Royal Atlantic headquarters was a glass and steel fortress in downtown Manhattan, a stark contrast to the chaotic energy of the airport. The conference room on the 40th floor offered a panoramic view of the city, but Beatrice couldn't bring herself to look out the window. She sat at the end of a long mahogany table. She wore her best navy suit, not her uniform. Her hair was pulled back in a severe bun, and she wore no makeup, hoping to look humble, perhaps even sympathetic. Across from her sat the tribunal. In the center was Mrs. Halloway, the Director of Human Resources. She was a woman known as the Ice Pick among the crew for her cold, piercing demeanor. To her left was the Chief Legal Counsel, a man with a face like a bulldog. To her right was a representative from the Flight Attendants Union, a man named Jerry, who looked like he would rather be anywhere else on earth. And sitting in the corner, silent and observing, was Arthur Sterling. He hadn't said a word since Beatrice entered the room. He just watched her, tapping a gold pen against a leather notebook. "This hearing is called to order," Mrs. Holloway said, her voice devoid of warmth. "We are here to review the employment status of Beatrice Geller following the incident on Flight 802. "I would like to make a statement," Beatrice blurted out. Her voice was hoarse. "I want to apologize. I was under extreme stress. My divorce, the traffic. I made a judgment call that was wrong. But 25 years of service shouldn't be erased by 5 bad minutes." Jerry, the union rep, cleared his throat. "Ms. Geller has a point. Her record is largely clean. We believe a suspension and mandatory sensitivity training would be appropriate." "Largely clean?" the legal counsel interrupted, sliding a thick file across the table. "Since the video went viral yesterday, we have received 412 emails from past passengers identifying Ms. Geller. They recount incidents ranging from rudeness to racial profiling dating back a decade. We simply never connected the dots until now because no one filmed it." Beatrice gaped at the file. That's a witch hunt. People are just jumping on the bandwagon." "The video speaks for itself," Mrs. Holloway said. She tapped a tablet, and the screen on the wall flickered to life. It wasn't the viral video this time. It was the security footage from the jet bridge and the galley. They watched in silence as Beatrice snatched the headphones. They watched her point her finger in Chloe's face. They watched her smug expression as she called the police. "This is a violation of Article 4, Section 9, assault on a passenger," Mrs. Holloway recited. "Article 7, discriminatory conduct. And Article 12, gross negligence causing reputational damage." "I didn't know who she was," Beatrice cried, her defense crumbling. "If I had known she was Mr. Sterling's daughter—" "Stop," Arthur Sterling spoke for the first time. The room went dead silent. Arthur stood up and walked slowly to the table. He placed his hands on the mahogany surface and leaned in. "That is exactly the problem, Ms. Geller. You are sorry because of who she is. If she had been a scholarship student with no father to walk onto that plane, you would have thrown her to the wolves. You would have let the police drag her off, book her, and ruin her record. You would have slept soundly that night, feeling powerful." Arthur's eyes were hard. "My daughter made her audition, by the way. She played the Sibelius violin concerto. The dean said it was the most moving performance he had heard in 10 years. She played with pain, Beatrice. The pain you caused her." Beatrice looked down at her hands. I'm glad she made it." "I'm sure you are," Arthur said dryly. "But we aren't here to discuss music. We are here to discuss liability." Mrs. Holloway adjusted her glasses. "Beatrice Geller, effective immediately. Your employment with Royal Atlantic is terminated. With cause." "Terminated?" Beatrice felt the room spin. "But my pension. I'm 6 months away from full vesting. If you fire me with cause—" "You lose the company contribution," Mrs. Holloway confirmed. "You will leave with only what you personally contributed. The rest is forfeited due to gross misconduct." "You can't do that," Beatrice shrieked, standing up. "That's hundreds of thousands of dollars. That's my retirement. I have nothing else." "You should have thought about that before you profiled a paying passenger," the legal counsel said, closing his folder. "Wait, there's more," Arthur said. He reached into his suit pocket and pulled out a white envelope. He slid it across the table to Beatrice. "What is this?" Beatrice whispered. "That," Arthur said, "is a civil demand letter." Beatrice opened the envelope with trembling fingers. Her eyes scanned the legal document. Demand for restitution. Claimant, Royal Atlantic Airways and Arthur Sterling. Itemization, 1. Flight delay costs, fuel, gate fees, crew overtime, 48,002. Passenger compensation, vouchers, upgrades for 200 passengers, 250,003. Emergency private charter, Gulfstream 4, JFK LTN, 65,004. Legal fees, 15,000. Total due, 378,000. Beatrice gasped, dropping the paper. You expect me to pay this? I don't have this kind of money. I'm bankrupt. Richard took the house. Then you will declare bankruptcy, Arthur said coldly, and we will garnish your wages from whatever job you find next. Though I imagine finding a job in the service industry will be difficult once they Google your name. This is cruel, Beatrice whispered, looking at Jerry, the union rep. Jerry, do something. Jerry closed his notebook. I'm sorry, B. The union defends workers against unfair dismissal. We don't defend this. You cost the airline $500,000 and a PR nightmare. You're on your own. Please, Beatrice begged, turning back to Arthur. Tears were ruining her blouse now. Mr. Sterling, please, I have children. Don't ruin my life over a mistake. Have mercy. Arthur looked at her. For a second, Beatrice thought she saw a flicker of hesitation. Mercy? Arthur repeated thoughtfully. That's an interesting word. Tell me, Beatrice, when my daughter sat there, alone, crying, telling you her phone was dead and she just wanted to go to her audition, did you show her mercy? Beatrice was silent. Did you? Arthur pressed. No, she whispered. Then why should you expect it from me? Arthur straightened his tie. You wanted to follow the rules, Beatrice. You wanted strict adherence to policy. Well, the policy says you pay for damages caused by negligence. I am just following the rules. He turned to the security guard standing by the door. Escort Ms. Geller out of the building and make sure she returns her badge. She doesn't fly with us anymore. As the guard stepped forward, Beatrice felt her legs give out. She didn't walk out of the room. She was practically carried, sobbing, her pleas echoing down the sterile hallway of the corporate office. Arthur watched her go, his expression unreadable. Was that too harsh, sir? Mrs. Halloway asked quietly after the door closed. She tried to have my daughter arrested, Arthur said, picking up his notebook. She tried to steal Chloe's future. I simply ensured she can't do it to anyone else's daughter. He walked to the window and looked out at the city. Send a memo to all staff, Arthur said. Retraining on bias and customer service, mandatory. And tell the PR team to draft a press release about our new scholarship program for underprivileged musicians. Let's turn this ugly moment into something beautiful. Yes, sir, Mrs. Halloway said. Arthur looked at his phone. A text from Chloe. Dad, I got in. First chair. Arthur smiled, the first genuine smile he had worn in 2 days. The storm was over. The trash had been taken out, and the music could finally begin. 6 months had passed since the incident on Flight 802. The world had largely moved on to the next viral scandal, the next outrage, the next hashtag. But for Beatrice Geller, time had stopped, or rather, it had rewound to a point she thought she had escaped 30 years ago. The neon sign of Burger Barn flickered ominously above her head as she wiped down the sticky Formica table. The smell here wasn't expensive leather and sterilized lemon. It was stale grease and despair. Hey, lady, I asked for extra ketchup. A teenager in a varsity jacket shouted from the booth behind her. He snapped his fingers. Chop, chop! Beatrice flinched. The sound of snapping fingers triggered a phantom headache that hadn't left her since the tribunal. Coming, she mumbled, grabbing a handful of packets from her apron. Her feet ached. She wasn't wearing her Italian pumps anymore. She was wearing generic orthopedic shoes that cost $20 at a discount store. She walked over to the table. The teenager looked at her, then nudged his friend. Yo, dude, look, it's her. The friend squinted, then laughed. No way. The airplane lady? The one who got owned by the billionaire? Beatrice felt her face burn. It happened at least twice a week. The video had been viewed 50 million times. Her face was a meme, the face of judgment. Can I get a selfie? The kid mocked, holding up his phone. Say, you don't fit the profile. Please, Beatrice whispered, dropping the ketchup on the table. Just eat your food. She retreated to the back kitchen, her heart hammering. This was her life now. The bankruptcy proceedings had taken her car and her savings. The civil judgment Arthur Sterling had enforced meant that 25% of every paycheck she earned at this minimum wage hellhole was automatically garnished. She was literally working to pay back the airline for the fuel she had wasted that day. She leaned against the deep fryer, closing her eyes. She remembered the feeling of the silk scarf around her neck, the power, the control. She had thrown it all away because she couldn't stand the sight of a black girl in a hoodie sitting in a seat she thought belonged to someone better. Beatrice, break's over, the manager shouted. He was 22 years old, younger than her own children, and he delighted in ordering her around. Beatrice sighed and walked back out to the dining area. Above the counter, a small TV was playing the evening news. Usually she tuned it out, but a familiar melody caught her ear. It was a violin, haunting, sharp, and incredibly fast. Beatrice looked up. The screen showed a concert hall in London, packed to the rafters. The chyron at the bottom read, Sold Out Debut. Chloe Sterling stuns at Royal Albert Hall. And there she was, Chloe. She wasn't wearing a hoodie now. She was wearing a gown of emerald silk that looked like liquid light. She stood center stage, her eyes closed, her body moving in perfect sync with the music she was pulling from the instrument. The same instrument Beatrice had shoved into an overhead bin. The camera cut to a post-concert interview. Chloe looked radiant, holding a bouquet of roses. It's been a crazy year, Chloe told the reporter, her voice humble and soft. But I think everything happens for a reason. That day on the plane, it was horrible, but it opened my eyes. It made me realize that so many talented people get stopped at the gate because of how they look or where they come from. The reporter nodded. And that's why you started the foundation? Yes, Chloe smiled. My father and I launched the Open Sky Scholarship last month. We provide full travel and tuition grants for young musicians from underrepresented communities. We want to make sure no one ever gets told they don't fit the profile again. Beatrice stared at the screen. The Open Sky Scholarship. The reporter laughed. And is it true the seed money for the foundation came from a legal settlement? Chloe's expression turned serious, but there was a glint of steel in her eyes, the same look her father had. Yes, every penny of the damages paid by the former employee goes directly into the fund. In a way, she's helping a lot of people right now. I hope she finds some peace in that. Beatrice felt the blood drain from her face. She wasn't just paying back the airline. She was funding the very people she had despised. Every burger she flipped, every table she wiped, every dollar garnished from her check was paying for a kid in a hoodie to fly first class to a bright future. The irony was so heavy, it almost crushed her. Hey, Karen, the kid in the booth shouted again. My milkshake is warm. Beatrice looked at the kid. Then she looked back at the TV, where Chloe Sterling was taking a final bow, bathed in applause and golden light. For the first time in her life, Beatrice didn't argue. She didn't fight back. She didn't demand to see a manager. I'll get you a fresh one, she said quietly. She walked to the machine, the noise of the diner fading into the background. She realized now that the karma wasn't the firing. It wasn't the bankruptcy. It wasn't even the viral shame. The real karma was knowing that she had been the villain in someone else's hero story. She was a footnote in Chloe Sterling's biography, a cautionary tale told to new hires. She had tried to be the gatekeeper, but all she had done was lock herself out. Beatrice pressed the button on the milkshake machine, watching the cold, white liquid swirl into the cup. It was going to be a long shift, and she had a lot of debt left to pay. Wow. Talk about a landing that no one walked away from unscathed. Beatrice thought she was protecting the image of first class, but she ended up paying for the next generation of talent to take those very seats. It just goes to show, prejudice isn't just cruel, it's expensive. It's a brutal lesson, but a necessary one. When you judge someone based on their appearance, you aren't defining them. You're defining yourself. And in Beatrice's case, that definition cost her everything. I want to know what you think. Do you think the punishment fit the crime? Was Arthur Sterling too harsh with the bankruptcy? Or did Beatrice get exactly what she deserved? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one. If you enjoyed this story and want to see more instant karma and dramatic justice, please hit that like button. It really helps the channel. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story. Thanks for watching, and remember, be kind to strangers. You never know who's really sitting in seat 1A.